Hello, guys. I hope you're doing just fine. I just want to ask you something. Are you working in international trade or just curious how global shipments work? Then, Incoterms are essential. You have to know what are those Incoterms. So, you are in the right place. In this video, I'll make them crystal clear. Now, the question is what's the meaning of those Incoterms? Well, Incoterms are the international commercial terms published by the International Chamber of Commerce (ICC) that clarify what the obligations of buyers and sellers in international trade. They specify how costs, risks, and responsibilities are divided between the two parties, the buyers and the sellers, for the transportation and delivery of goods. In simple words, Incoterms are international rules for shipping stuff. Who does what? Who pays for what? Like transport, insurance, customs, who pays for those things? Who's responsible if something goes wrong? Like any kind of damage, loss, or risks, etc. So now, to truly understand the meaning of those Incoterms, we need to know first that there are 11 Incoterms split into two groups, like two families. The first family is applied for any mode of transport, and we have 7 members, like 7 Incoterms in this family. First, X-Works, FCA, DAP, DDP, CIP, DPU, and CPT. And we will see the meaning of each one of those Incoterms. And the second family, we have 4 members, and it's applied for sea and inland waterways. And we have FOB, CFR, FAC, and CIF. So to make this easy to understand, let's look at a simple example. Imagine two fictional companies. The first one is called Buy de Brazil, a buyer based in Sao Paulo in Brazil. The second company is named Technova, located in Munich in Germany. In this example, Technova sells 500 laptops to Buy de Brazil, and the products are shipped by sea freight. Let's start with the first family, which is Incoterms for any mode of transport. We have first X-Works. What this means? We have Technova, the seller, is responsible for making the goods available at their facility in Munich, at their warehouse in Munich, providing commercial documents like invoice, packing list, COO, etc. That's it. She's not responsible for loading the goods into the buyer's transport, not responsible for export clearance, transport, insurance, etc. She just needs to make the goods and the documents ready at their warehouse in Munich. Now, by the Brazil, the buyer is responsible for loading the goods at Technova's site, at Technova's warehouse, export customs clearance in Germany, arranging and paying for inland transport from Technova's warehouse to the port in Germany, international shipping from Germany to Brazil, import clearance, duties, and taxes in Brazil, finally, delivery to their own warehouse in Sao Paulo in Brazil. Now coming to the second Incoterm, which is FCA, free carrier. What this means that Technova, the seller, is responsible for transporting the goods to the named place, like Munich terminal, for example. That named place is already confirmed between the buyer and the seller, loading the goods into the buyer's carrier at that location, and take care of export customs clearance in Germany. At that point, risks transfer to the buyer once the goods are handed over the carrier at the named place. Now coming to the buyer, which is Buy de Brazil. Now he is responsible for booking the main international from from Germany to Brazil, take care of insurance and import customs clearance, duties, taxes, and delivery at Buy de Brazil warehouse. Now coming to the third Incoterm, which is CPT, Carriage Paid To. Now we have Teknova. The seller is responsible for what? He is responsible for export customs clearance in Germany, transportation of the goods to where? To Brazil's airport. Yes, to Sao Paulo airport. And he will pay all freight charges to that named destination, which is Brazil's airport. But we have a thing here. We have that the buyer will be responsible for the risk. The risk transfers from the seller to the buyer as soon as the goods are handed over the first carrier in Germany. Not when they will arrive in Sao Paulo, no, before that, in the first carrier in Germany. And now the buyer is responsible for what else? For insurance, for import duties, taxes, and customs clearance in Brazil, and of course inland transport from the airport to their final destination, to the warehouse. FCIP, which is carriage and insurance paid to. She is very similar to CPT, but with insurance included. What this means that Teknova, the seller, is responsible for export customs clearance in Germany, transportation the goods to Sao Paulo's airports, paying all freight charges to that named destination, which is Sao Paulo or Brazil airport, purchasing insurance coverage for the goods at least up to the named destination, which is Brazil airports. Now, coming to the insurance, under CIP, the seller must obtain minimum insurance coverage up to the ICC. However, the buyer can ask for higher coverage and agree to share extra costs or whatever. And the risk transfer point, like CPT, the risk transfers from the seller to the buyer when the goods are handed over the first carrier, not when they will arrive in Sao Paulo. Now, the buyer is responsible for import customs clearance duties and taxes in Brazil and inland transport from the airports, from Sao Paulo's airports to their warehouse. DAP, delivered at place. What this means that Teknova, the seller, is responsible for export customs clearance in Germany, all transportation costs to the buyer's warehouse in Sao Paulo, risk and responsibility all the way until the goods are delivered at the buyer's named place in Brazil, at the buyer's warehouse. Unloaded is not the seller's responsibility unless otherwise agreed before between the buyer and the seller. The risk transfer point. Risk transfers only when the goods are made available to the buyer at agreed destinations. It could be their warehouse, could be other place. Now the buyer's responsibility is to unload the goods at their warehouse, import customs clearance and all import duties and taxes in Brazil. Now we have DPU, which is delivered at place unloaded. What this means that Teknova, the seller, is responsible for export customs clearance in Germany, all transportation costs to Sao Paulo, unloading the goods at the buyer's warehouse. Risk remains with the seller until goods are unloaded at the named place. By the Brazil, which is the buyer, is responsible for import duties, taxes, and customs clearance in Brazil. He's not responsible for transport or unloading, just customs and receiving the goods. Now we have a key point for DPU. DPU is the only Incoterm where the seller must unload the goods at the destination. If the seller doesn't want to handle the unloading, DAP would be more appropriate. The difference between DAP and DPU is the unloading, just the unloading. And now we have the last Incoterm in this family, which is the DP. delivery duty paid, which is the most favorite Incoterm for the buyers but the worst for the sellers. Now, the seller is responsible for almost everything: export customs clearance in Germany, all transportation costs to Sao Paulo, import customs clearance in Brazil, payment of all import duties, taxes, and fees in Brazil, delivery of the goods to the buyer's warehouse in Sao Paulo, risk and responsibility all the way until delivery at the final destination. Risk transfer point: risk only transfers to the buyers once the goods are delivered at their final agreed place, which is in this case by the Brazil warehouse. Here the buyer's warehouse, yes. And coming to the buyer's responsibility, almost nothing related to the transportation or customs, just unloading the goods at their own warehouse, unless agreed otherwise.